Happy Wednesday. Welcome to the Osceola Seminole Sidelines live show, 7 p.m. Eastern. We're here on the Osceola's YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. Spend some time with the Osceola staff. We have publisher Jerry Cutts, football analyst Patrick Burnham, senior writer Kurt Weiler. I am Bob Ferranti. Just so you know, we'll structure this 2 segments, a lot of football camp talk to start, and then we will, of course, dive into FSU and the ACC realignment discussion. But it is football season. We are 11 practices in. And guys, let's just start with some quick, big picture thoughts. 11 practices in. Jerry, you've seen every single one of them. What's your biggest takeaway?
I think you got a football team. I think the guys enjoy each other. They're talented. They're deep. I think you got a football team.
That's a good start. Pat, what do you got?
Well, I think you got a good football team. I will put it particularly on offense. I think they're going to be. I think they have a chance to be one of the better offenses, certainly in the ACC, if not the country. Obviously, they got one of the best quarterbacks in the nation, but and a lot of talent around, as we've seen with Keon Coleman and even Des Hill, who's been sitting for 2 years, and Jeremiah Byers. I can go on and on and on. But I think they've got a really good chance to be very tough for opposing offenses to cover. We had this discussion coming back from Jacksonville. How do you defend Jordan Travis with 5 in the box? How do you cover the receivers with 7 in the box? You're almost destined as a defensive coordinator to have to play 6 in the box against them the entire season. But anyway, that's not what you guys wanted to hear. But I think they got a chance to be very good offensively. Listen, we all know there's some question marks depth-wise on defense. We feel pretty good about their frontline players. You got to have some quality depth at linebacker and quality depth at safety. The issue is those guys are true freshmen, redshirt freshmen by the most part on that side of the ball. So there's going to be some trial by fire. Do they show great ability? Yes, they show potential, but there's going to be some lessons that are learned hard this football season because those guys are young. But we obviously like the front 4 and like the first unit at linebacker. But there's some question marks there for sure.
All right, Kirk, you've made that Jacksonville trip too with the guys. You've seen all these practices. Your big takeaway.
Yeah, it's tough to read too much into, obviously, with the schedule being front-loaded like it is, especially a big game one like you have in LSU. I mean, the problem is it's hard to ascertain too much reliable intel out of kind of LSU and Clemson's preseason. So I don't want to say kind of how it affects where Florida State's chances of winning those games, but I definitely do feel better about this team than I did coming into the preseason with, what we've seen from Keon Coleman, with what we've seen from Destin Hill, with what we've seen from Braden Fisk and quite a few other guys. There are questions, and I don't think any of us are going to say this is a perfect team that is flawless and nothing can go wrong, for sure. But, I feel better about this team. I struggle to project that onto the first couple games just because there's some variables there that are outside of what we're seeing. But I feel good. I agree.
Yeah, I think the reasons why we feel good is Florida State once again nailed it in the transfer portal, bringing in some really good talent. And it's not every single one of them are going to be incredible, but a lot of those guys you've been hearing good things about through camp. It's been very consistent day in, day out. I think Mike Norvell has done a really good job of just identifying talent acquisition in addition to talent retention, getting these guys back off that 2022 roster and keeping them around for this run this year. So let's move into some of these kind of, we'll call it a roundtable of sorts. We'll go with one player who's impressed. Jerry, you can pick offense, defense, one player who's impressed you.
I'd say Braden Fisk on defense and Keon Coleman on offense. I know that's 2,
but save some for the rest of us, Jerry.
I was going to say, come on, Jerry.
You can't hog everybody.
Pick one.
Yeah.
I mean, I know you
always. I'm going to go with Braden Fisk. I think a defensive lineman can affect every play on the defense, and whereas receivers, they don't get as many opportunities to have as dramatic an effect. Having said that, though, Coleman can also. I'll leave this to you guys, but Coleman can also make an impact on special teams. So, he's a game changer in one play. But I think I'm going to stick with Braden for my pick because I love defense, and I just think he's a disruptor.
Well, and it's not just the thing with Braden you like is it feels like he has sequences he builds off himself, or he often stacks good plays together, has a couple in a row. He makes the most of when he's out there for sure.
And I'd also say, just to finish my part on him, is he can play the edge too. And I've been a little, as I watch Florida State, I don't have to give a scouting report. Not that anybody would listen to it anyway, but we're going to have to prove we can defend the edge, and I think Braden Fisk gives you a really a very significant force. He might be our most agile defensive lineman. I mean, I think he's got lateral movement that's excellent, and of course he can push the line of scrimmage and play in your backfield. So that's my pick.
Well, listen, Braden's certainly been, I think, better than they expected. And listen, I think he can help you on the outside. I don't think that's where you want to line him up on a regular basis. I think you line him up there in some third down pass rush situations. But I don't think he's a first down and 10 outside guy. And then, of course, we'd be talking about Darrell Jackson if Darrell was eligible, because that kid is unbelievable, and he is a future first or second round draft pick. And I think Braden's going to play in the NFL. So I like Jerry's pick. Braden has certainly been a guy that's impressed all of us, and we were impressive. It got more impressive once he got into pads, right?
Yeah.
I mean, his speed, like we saw the speed racing Norvell in the spring when he wasn't practicing, but speed is not always football speed. His speed is football speed. He moves fast in plays. He can pivot quickly, change directions quickly. He is a impressive athlete at 300 pounds.
Kurt, please tell me we're not judging speed by who races Mike Norvell.
Well, but I'm saying that is speed.
He's a 4'9" all day.
And you know what? If a 300-pound guy can run a defensive tackle is run, I don't know if he's a 4'9". I think that's a bit slow.
Right.
But
he's 40 years old. 4'9" is pretty. 4'9" pretty good for a 40-year-old receiver now.
Yeah. It's not always a fair race, too. To be fair, maybe
it is a 4'9".
Yeah, Mike usually gets a pretty good hair start. All right, so I
think the big thing with him too that makes him look faster even than he is that he just has a motor. The ball runs to the right, and he's chasing it to the sidelines from the left. He just gets around the ball, and he's got a motor. And that, as Pat and everybody else knows that's listening, you got one guy like that on your team, and all of a sudden you got 11.
Yep.
Another guy I'm thinking about who's impressed, thinking about Keziah Holmes, just because when you went into this camp, you're thinking about that running back depth chart. You're thinking about who might emerge as a number 2 option, number 3 option. I'm not sure I had Keziah Holmes as a number 2 option or a number 3 option.
No.
And now I'm starting to sell myself of, yes, Lawrence Toafili does a lot of things great. He catches the ball so well. I mean, there is a value in Lawrence Toafili, but there is a tremendous value in what Keziah Holmes has brought to this table. To Pat's point, would love to see the scrimmages, want to see how this really shows in 11 on 11. But I don't think the coach speak is exaggerating it too much. They are really seeing Keziah's toughness, physicality, what he's showing out there. I think has really taken me by surprise. What have you guys seen from Keziah, for example?
Well, I mean, we've seen it in 11 on 11 when they don't tackle. He's right before they left for Jacksonville, he had a couple of big days back to back, some nice long runs, and I think we saw him have a good camp in Jacksonville. But yeah, certainly as we've talked, I think Kurt made the statement the other day. It might have been Jerry, but when you look at that running back room 1 to 5 or however you want to term it, going all the way down to C.J. Cantwell, I don't know where C.J. is on the depth chart, but but anyway, it's a pretty deep room.
I was going to say, in the preseason, one of our subscribers, Josh Szymanski, called me, former writer for the Osceola, and he was asking me about Keziah. And I said, to be honest with you, I haven't really paid attention to him yet. This was before we really got into it. I did him last year, and but he was being redshirted or whatever, sitting that year out. And boy, I called Josh the next day and said, your boy can play, and what I see in him, he's built a lot like Benson. And I don't want to say their running styles are alike, but I think you can run a lot of the same plays with both of them. When you look at going from Benson to Toafili, it's a lot different package. And that's not a bad thing. Diversity is a good thing, but for depth, I really like the fact that excuse me a second, that you have two backs that I think you can call the same play, and it doesn't matter which one of them's in there.
I agree. I think he can run. I think he is maybe a little shiftier in space and maybe not as strong as going to break so many tackles like Trey Benson does. But I think running styles are similar enough. I agree with you. People forget he was a top 200 recruit out of Titusville in the 2020 class. And I mean, he in Penn State, frankly, I mean, has a good track record of running backs. He kind of just got buried in a room with injuries and with a lot of recruiting going on there. But no, I mean, he's probably been, I might have written his name more than any other running back so far this preseason. Feels like part of that is a Benson rep control thing. They know what they have in Benson and don't want to overwork him. And he's made some more plays the more they've had pads on. But I think I've probably written his name the most in my practice notes.
Yeah, I agree. I think he's a guy that can run the ball between the tackles, outside the tackles. He's listed at about 208 pounds. And he's 5'11". He's compact. He's explosive, and he's a guy that, as Kurt said, has really called I think all of our attention this camp.
And guys, let's think about any other guys who've impressed. One name that comes to mind for me is an AZ Thomas, right? I mean, AZ has gone up against Johnny Wilson in various situations, especially 11-on-11, quite a bit. It seems like whenever you see the ball being thrown toward Johnny, AZ is there and has to match up to that physicality, to that challenge. That's going to make AZ better on Saturdays, quite obviously. Year two for AZ, we thought this was going to be a real big recruiting win when they got him late, last December. But for him to have this kind of development in year two, any thoughts on what AZ could bring to the table?
I remember last year being wowed. We were all wowed by AZ. He was kind of a turnover machine before the pads came on. And I remember, I think Marcus Woodson, DB's coach at the time, kind of said, well, I think AZ is he's an all-star without the pads on. We need to see what happens when the pads come on. And I think he kind of went through some struggles a bit more when the pads came on. He played, he managed to carve out a bit of a role for himself, but I've been impressed with AZ. I mean, like you said, he goes against Johnny a lot. He's going against Deuce Spain. He's the tallest, true outside cornerback they have, or at least one of them. And so they put him against those guys a lot. He doesn't win every rep because, I mean, you're not going to win every rep against guys that big, but he is normally in very good position and makes things hard for them. I mean, if it's that jump ball to Johnny where he's 6'7" and can elevate for a ball that you're not going to get to, there's not much you can do. But he's in good position. He makes things tough. He battles those guys. And I think he talked today about kind of that's making me better, and I think you're seeing that.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think he's going to be better because of who he's gone against this past spring. And obviously this fall, you're not going to face a lot of receivers that are much better than Keon Coleman and Johnny Wilson, particularly, Johnny from a size standpoint, Keon from a talent standpoint. But yeah, I think he's got, listen, they need him to have a breakout season. The secondary needs some stars back there. They were improved last year. But we'll find out how it goes. But yeah, he's been impressive. Listen, and I don't want to get off on a tangent about some of the young guys because they have not played a lot of 11-on-11 tackle football, but we've seen some of those young DBs, and we can talk about this another time. But there's some young DBs that are making an impression in camp outside of the 11-on-11 scrimmages we don't get to see. Now, my guy is Jeremiah Byers. I would have gone with Darrell Jackson if he was eligible. And if he is eligible, I'll come back and we'll do this show again so I can rave about Darrell Jackson. But to me, Jeremiah Byers is the best offensive lineman Florida State has had in several years, and I don't think it's close. Listen, he goes up against Jared Verse, Patrick Payton, Gilbert Edmond, Braden Fisk every day. You're not going to win every rep, as Kurt alluded to when we're talking about AZ. That's not how it works in college football. You're going to get beat sometimes. But Jeremiah Byers is consistently the best offensive lineman that Florida State has in any kind of pass pro, whether it's one-on-one pass pro, whether it's stunting games, where they're passing defenders off, depending on where they're coming from. I think he's the best offensive tackle Florida State's had, certainly since we started covering the program in 2019, and obviously maybe even a couple years before that. Can he be a difference? I don't know if you can have a difference maker on an offensive line, but he's going to make that offensive line a lot better. And I think his presence, not only is he going to help the starting lineup, I think it's helped guys like Robert Scott and Bless Harris because it's raised the level of competition. But I think he's a guy that is people are going to be very impressed with once they get to see him play.
Agreed.
Yeah, some good thoughts there, guys. I agree with all the picks that we kind of have a consensus here, which I think is good to hear. Let's move into one position group that has improved, and we may have more consensus here. But Jerry, I'll start with you.
Well, I'm torn a little bit between the linebackers and the safeties. I came into this year worried about depth at the safety. And I'm not worried anymore. I think I knew I liked Shaheem Brown. I think he's a real football player. And, of course, you have Akeem Dent back there, but I worried about what was next. And, Knowles, moving him there is potentially a good thing. I think he's a football player, instincts. And there's been some other fellows that have stepped up there that I like. We brought in a couple of new guys. I mean, Kirkland can play. Barker can play. They're rangy. I'm telling you, I think I could probably name another one, and maybe you guys can help me.
Conrad
Hussey. Thank you. That's a freshman, a true freshman. And what an impact that kid has made, and he'll only get better. So you go from kind of feeling good about 2 to feeling really pretty good about, maybe there's 4 or 6 there. And let me just add a historical perspective on this. When we were over there at the Jacksonville, I was talking to Leon Fowler, and I wrote this earlier about the 93 team. We think about that first national championship thing, and we don't think it had any warts. But boy, when you go back and look, that 92 team, we graduated both of our starting safeties and the primary backup. The only guys we had coming back was a very, Richard Coase was a very late take in that recruiting class. And Devin Bush now, we remember Devin being a senior or a junior, but Devin going into that year had very few base reps. And we managed to get through that year with Coase and Bush without an injury. And I think it was, there was one more guy, Hammond, I think, or no, it was Sean Hamlet played, that year. But, we've got a lot better depth at safety, thanks to this camp and the guys that Mike brought in the offseason. And that I think we're much improved at that position.
It's an area where we get to, thank Mike Norvell a great deal for getting to watch. We've got to watch 10 of the 11 full practices so far. The scrimmage is the only thing we didn't get to watch on Sunday night. But, we get to see that. We're not taking him at his word. We see it with our own 2 eyes and kind of can give you all the truth. I was going to say the defensive backs, Terry. I think I did the math today in my observations. I think I went back and scrolled through Adam Fuller's Twitter timeline when he does the mission takeaways. I think those freshman DBs, not just the safeties, the corners too, I think have combined for 9 interceptions or 9 turnovers, 4 takeaways through 11 practices. I think Barker's got 2. I think Hussey's got 3. I think Joseph's got 1. Quindarius Jones has 2. They're all making plays, and I don't know if they're all going to play this season because there's really not that much to go around, but it's going to bring out the best. Especially with how that defensive back class is shaping up. in the 2024 class they're assembling right now. I mean, you feel great about that. I think you feel better than you thought you did. I mean, we're not even talking about throwing Fentrell Cypress, who's had such success in Virginia. I think the entire secondary, but I mean, it's it is. I mean, it feels like the Pat Surtain effect. It feels like that you're already seeing some fruits of what seems to be early returns being a great hire Mike Norvell made.
Yeah. Well, let's let the bullets start flying first. All right. I think they had to move Knowles to safety because of the lack of depth there. And listen, this is a different world than in 1990. These spread offenses, RP offenses, require a lot of discipline as a defensive back. These are true freshmen. They show a lot of them are true freshmen, redshirt freshmen. They show huge potential. I'm not going to downsell that. But I am going to say baptism by fire could be a part of this process for this season. But yes, absolutely. I mean, we have walked away multiple days talking about Conrad Hussey and Edwin Joseph. And listen, I've almost forgotten about my man Quindarius Jones in all of this. So yes, they getting better? Yes, but I do just want to stress that this is a young secondary, particularly at safety. Once you get past Knowles and the
you go in with three guys you're really comfortable with, veterans at safety.
And the good thing is, the nice thing we're seeing flashes from all of them, you'd hope you can get at least something from one of those three. It could be which one of those three survives in the fire, but you're hopeful one of them can to round out that 2D.
Yeah. Listen, I think it's got a chance. I really do. I think it's got a chance. They got some talented kids there, but I think we do need to take into part that there could be some baptism by fire, particularly when you open up with LSU.
And injury luck's always going to play a role. I mean, you talk to the 93 team, that 2013 team was exceptionally talented and exceptionally lucky about injuries. I mean, both so that's always going to play a factor for sure.
Yeah.
I think we're in agreement on defensive backs, in particular safety. On offense, how do we feel about the improvement of the tight end group? Let's say since the bowl game, because we saw Jaheim Bell, we saw Kyle Morlock in the spring. We know Marquiston Douglas Biscuit can make one-handed grabs and he can move better than how many 290-pound tight ends are out there or whatever he is. But has this tight end group come farther than maybe any other position group since that Oklahoma game?
Listen, either that or wide receiver, right? I mean, with the addition of what they've done with the portal. But listen, we've even seen improvement out of Preston Daniel. I mean, I don't know that there's an assistant coach on Florida State staff who's gotten more out of the players that he's had in these first 3 years under Mike than Chris Thompson. He did not get handed many weapons when he got here. If you guys remember what the tight end room looked like when Mike and Chris got here. But certainly you had Jaheim Bell, Kyle Morlock, Biscuit, and listen, we were early impressed with Jackson West and early in camp. I think you're right, Bob. I mean, that room because of Jaheim Bell and Kyle Morlock and what they're going to be able to do from a personnel formation standpoint may have the biggest impact on what Mike's able to do with the offense this year.
Yeah, I'll be curious if they can bring out some pages of the Memphis playbook a little bit more than they weren't able to do just from a personnel versatility standpoint the last couple years. Okay, so let's kind of look at areas of improvement. Let's toss out one position group that, let's just say, we want to see more from. Jerry, what's your pick?
Hold on. I don't mean to delay the show, but it's a tough one.
Easy one.
Okay, you go first, Pat.
Linebacker. And with the offenses they're going to have to defend, the responsibilities that linebackers have against these RPO offenses, you've got 3 proven linebackers coming into this season. Based on what we've seen, your 4th best may be a guy that's been in the program less than a month.
Yeah.
And he's a true freshman. They have to hope that they can get through this season relatively healthy at linebacker. That's a hard position to play as a true freshman, particularly about with what offenses do in today. It's a different ball game. And I think that is my major concern on this roster heading into the LSU game.
Yeah, I know. At Sunday night after the scrimmage, I mean, AJ Cottrell got a little praise, and awesome for AJ Cottrell who's a walk-on. But that does kind of speak to. I mean, if you're hearing a lot of praise for a walk-on, it's a little. You've got to like read between the lines a little there of like, oh well, a little. I'm with you.
Well, listen, I agree. I agree somewhat with that statement. Now, I was told by someone after the spring that they thought he had a chance to help this team. Now, a lot of that has to do with the fact that they're not very deep. You're correct about that. But yeah, so I'm not surprised to hear his name, but it does speak to the fact that, listen, we've seen walk-ons had be very successful. But yeah, I think that does. You're right, Kurt. It does speak to the lack of depth, and it does speak to the actually the youth at that position. But that if that is the that's the one I worry about the most. And
that being said, I've been really impressed with DJ Lundy the last few days. He has been a guy who's been around the ball, who's been making plays. I mean, I think there's a world where I know Mike Norvell asked about him today. He thinks he's in the best shape of his life. I think he kind of put on some good weight after losing maybe some bad weight. And I think you're seeing that. And I mean, I think that does help things. But like you said, there are 3 guys I think you feel pretty good about. Yep. And beyond that, it's going to be someone who hasn't played a ton of college football, if any.
Yeah. You got to, one of these guys may step up and take the challenge and be better than we thought. But again, we don't get to see the scrimmages, so we don't know how they do when they're playing real football. But certainly, I have been impressed with the kid from Northwestern, as I have any of the true freshmen, whether it's Blake Nicholson, DeMarco Ward, Dylan Brown Turner. I certainly think that the kid from Northwestern has Justin Cryer has held his own for sure. Yes. And he's a big, thick kid. They liked him out of high school. Mike talked about it about the kid a couple of times since we've been in camp, and he's a kid they wanted and decided for whatever reason to go to Northwestern. I guess I'm assuming academics were a high priority for him, and who knows? You don't know the relationships he had with the guys that were recruiting him from there. But I was a little shocked that he's been he's gotten right in there and tried to compete, and he seems to be a guy that might be that 4th guy that FSU is looking for.
I got a chance to interview him today, and it's interesting. I mean, he's a great interview, as you would imagine he would be. And he was very candid about, you can watch it on our YouTube channel, but he was very candid about how difficult the adjustment is. When he went from high school in a 4-3, 4-2 defense to Northwestern, they ran that same defense. And it was a pretty easy adjustment. And then, a month later, he's here, and he's got a multiple defense. I mean, he said his head's just swimming. How much we do, but he's very complimentary of the DJ Lundy and Deloche and even the guys on the front and in the secondary helping them get lined up. But to Pat's point, the thing I noticed about him the first week, and we can talk about this with our freshman quarterback as well, he has a presence on the field. When he walks out there, I asked him, I said, "You look comfortable. Are you as comfortable as you look?" And that's when he went, "No." There's so much coming at me, you can't even imagine. But he lines up out there, and I've seen him adjusting guys on the defensive front, kicking one of his fellow linebackers into a different gap. He just seems to be comfortable, even though he claims he's not.
He's natural. It seems. Yep. I mean, he seems pretty instinctive if he is still swimming as much as he said he is.
Well, listen, I'm sure he is. It's kind of like trying to drink water from a fire hydrant for a college football freshman. I mean, you're getting information. I talked to one of the freshmen coming out of the building one day, and he's like, "Man, my head's swimming, taking in so much information." And listen, it's a young group. We all like Blake coming out of high school. DeMarco is a physical kid. They're both true freshmen. Even AJ Cottrell's a redshirt freshman. I mean, this is a very young group, and the good news about that is they all should get better. Probably the bad news on that, they're going to have to get better on Saturday. It's not pretty quickly. But listen, but yeah, Cryer. I was surprised when they first, and I'll be honest with you, first announced they'd taken a transfer linebacker from Northwestern. I just assumed it was a upperclassman, right? Because we all talked about the need for Florida State to have some more experienced depth there. So when they took him, I was like, oh, well, don't really get it. But now that I've seen him, obviously you got to put your faith in what they saw in him coming out of high school, and it's obviously at least we see the potential in the kid right off the bat.
We got to talk about. I think were you going to say more on linebackers there? I was going to move on.
I just want to say one thing before we jump is we talked about young safeties and young linebackers. And while they probably can't help you as much as you'd like them to in the big games, the games that you got to win, I think they can be a big help to you on all your special teams because they're runners and hitters. And they may be good enough to give you some quality reps on special teams that keep your main guys from having to, play more reps than necessary.
Well, and they'll need those reps on special teams to be comfortable playing from scrimmage.
And you would think non-LSU Clemson, there are a number of games in the FSU schedule where they could get plenty of second half reps, like we saw down the stretch last year with kind of the stretch of dominant, convincing wins FSU had where Jordan Travis didn't play much after halftime.
Yeah, I can see about 5 or 6 of those games.
Yep. Speaking of Jordan Travis, he is not here. I don't want to make anybody panic. Jordan Travis has looked great. I mean, I was in awe watching him today. He was just surgical, cutting through the defense. He looks like he's in complete control. He's not perfect. I think the defense gets him sometimes, and that's a testament to the defense. But he's just looked so good. That being said, I think we can all agree. I mean, you didn't expect any of the 3 backups to be pushing Jordan. Jordan is the starter. He's a Heisman candidate. That being said, Jordan is very, very far in a class of his own. And, I mean, the fact that your second best quarterback right now might be Brock Glenn is not speak well of that room.
I think I've voiced these concerns. I know we got busted, I think, as a beat for how critical we were of Tate Rodemaker, what we had seen through practices, and then what he did up at Louisville in the second half. Props to Tate Rodemaker for that half, to the coaching staff.
Props to Pat Burnham for calling it.
Yeah, I'm pointing up. That was we were sitting there. You were not panicking at Louisville like I was.
Now,
I thought Kurt was going to lose it in the press box.
let's just say that Tate Rodemaker might not be the most impressive practice player or practice quarterback. He doesn't show maybe the best version of himself. We just haven't seen that with consistency. We're seeing a little bit of Brock Glenn that is just like, man, this kid is coming on and showing it maybe faster ahead of schedule than a lot of us perhaps expected. I don't think anybody wants to put a true freshman quarterback out there in the event that something happens to Jordan. But with these games potentially getting out of hand from a score standpoint, you need to be in the business of developing your number 2 quarterback. I think an argument could be made that it's Brock Glenn right now. Any thoughts that you guys have?
Yeah, I think it's. I still don't think they've decided who number 2 is. I think it's gotten a little bit clearer based off what we've seen. But yes, listen. Here's the thing that I think we have to remember: whoever is the number 2 is going to be surrounded by some really good players. And let me make this: there is no quarterback that is a game manager. They handle the ball too many times to manage a game. They are always different makers because of what they can or can't do. They always make it. So I'm not going to say it here and say that they have to come in and manage a game. They don't, but they have to come in and be able to use the talent that is surrounding them. And there's a ton of talent surrounding whoever is FSU's second team quarterback. So I've never believed in a quarterback as a game manager. There's just they change the game because of what they can or cannot do on the field, period. But listen, I think that whoever is the backup quarterback needs to place their confidence in the fact that they are surrounded by the best offensive line that Florida State's had in years and some of the best skill positions players it's had in the 5 years we've been doing this anyway.
Brock looked great today. He's by no means perfect. He threw a pick today, although it was not his fault. It bounced off a tight end's hands and was intercepted. But he had a beautiful throw down the seam to Jaheim Bell today. He had, I think, a long touchdown run, probably a 30, 35-yard touchdown run today behind Julian Armella, who got downfield for a nice block. Mike Norvell heaps a lot of praise on him. He gets asked about Brock a lot, and I will say Mike seems to do that a lot with new quarterbacks. You always want to ask about them because readers want to know, and he's normally he's gonna those are guys he's gonna be much kinder to than hard on. But I think the thing that really jumped out, I mean, he was very high on him in the scrimmage, and then I think what he said today, he told him coming off the field, he said like, it's very easy to coach you because he said you do not make the same mistake twice very often. He said that's a great trait for a quarterback to have, and that's happening for a freshman quarterback, and that he has, I think, already improved and grown pretty comfortable pretty fast, speaks highly of what his future here could be.
Yeah, I think he's got a little bit of the it factor. He seems to carry himself differently. We've talked about that as a staff. Mike's talked about it as he's mature beyond his years. Listen, that's what we think going in. Who knows when Harold Perkins is coming off the edge? What's going to happen with the quarterback? But
hopefully hopefully.
Well, yeah. But I'm just making a point. But I want 13 in the whole game against LSU. So I don't want anybody else in the ball game. But yeah, I think he does seem to. I could, and maybe it's because he wears number 11. But he kind of reminds me of Casey Weldon. He's a better athlete than you think. He seems to carry himself with shoulders back, head up. You don't ever see him get frustrated. He takes to coaching. He threw an interception in Jacksonville in the end zone, and Toe Carts was on it from the get-go. Where are you on the field? You can't make this mistake at the 10-yard line. You can't do it. Listen, he takes the coaching. He seems unfazed. I think it's not. I don't think that battle's over yet, but I do think that you're right. I think there's something to that fact that Brock could be your guy as the number 2.
I've wondered for years how it is that schools like University of North Carolina can bring in a freshman and start him right away. And he goes on and successful. They've had 2 back-to-back.
Yep.
And goodness gracious, I can hardly think of one. Here, I mean, Jameis redshirted. He could have done it without redshirting him, but we just haven't seemed to get those guys. In the Bowden era, it took 3 years before they saw the field, except for a couple. And but this kid is that kid. It looks to me that he has that quality that you all talked about, where he's unfazed. He just looks like he belongs, out there.
Well, and Jerry, some of that may have to do with, Florida State's has a great tradition at quarterback, right? I mean, they've always been talented, so it's always been, then they kind of went through the James Blackman era where they struggled to find somebody. They bring Mackenzie Milton in because they didn't know if Jordan could do it. So there's been some question marks about, and I think it may have to do with the fact that maybe North Carolina's roster was a little depleted. They've had back-to-back true freshman quarterback start. B, those are obviously NFL caliber players. Yeah. You've got the kid that graduated that was Sam, whatever his name is. He's a starting quarterback for the Redskins, and Drake May is going to be the first or second pick in the draft if he does anything this year that he's expected to do. And then the other thing I'm going to mention, and I'm not a huge 7-on-7 guy, but these young quarterbacks come into college anymore throwing the ball in 7-on-7 all the time. I think they're more comfortable than I think that is one of the benefits of these 7-on-7s. I still think people should, and I'm going to get off on a tangent here. I don't like the all-star 7-on-7 teams that these kids do. They should do it with their teams, high school teams. Todd Fordham, I had that conversation at practice the other day, former FSU offensive lineman who's the coach at Bowles where his son plays, tight end actually. But anyway, I think that's helped speed up the development of some of these quarterbacks. When they come in, they're very they're probably advanced in reading coverages to some extent. They're not going to see the mix of coverages that they're going to see at the major college level in high school. You just don't have the time to put all that in. But I do think that's probably a benefit. And I'm sure Brock and Tate and AJ, for that matter, have spent a ton of time doing 7-on-7 coming into before they got to FSU. And I think that's probably helped these quarterbacks adjust a little bit quicker than they would have 20 years ago when 7-on-7s were something you did with your high school team after you lifted weights.
And every quarterback, it seems today, has a quarterback coach.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Somebody's making money.
Yeah.
Money makes the world go around.
That's
But
right.
it's a lot of year-round stuff, not like in the old days where a quarterback played 3 sports.
Yeah, the only thing I worry about that, and it's another conversation for another time, but once you get to college, how many voices do you want your quarterback to be hearing?
Oh, I know.
Yeah, I mean, Tony Tokarts, does he really want Denny Thompson over in Jacksonville talking to Luke once he's with Seminole? And I mean, that's their business. I'm just saying. I mean, but anyway, that's neither here nor there. Let's move on.
But the part about Brock, I mean, the Brock of it all, Brock is doing this because it feels like neither AJ Duffy nor Tate Rodemaker are especially taking the reins. I think we thought both of them had a chance. I thought AJ took some steps forward in the spring, and I haven't really seen those carry over to the fall. And Tate is always going to be Tate. If Tate were to be the starting quarterback next year, it would be because no one else rose to the occasion. It feels like Brock might be rising to the occasion.
Well, listen, that's going to be a fun spring when it comes to quarterbacks next year. You're going to have 4. Right now, you're going to have 4 of them here.
We'll see if you have 4.
Well, yeah, there's as we've mentioned in some articles, there are some long-term implications if depending on who gets named the number 2 and how the season works out. But I think spring, as excited as I am about the 2023 season, I mean, I don't know if I'm more excited to see what happens with the quarterbacks in 2024.
That will be fun to watch. That will be a storyline for next spring, and the transfer portal will giveth and potentially taketh by that spring anyway. Well, hey, we're going to let Kurt Weiler jump out here as we transition into a discussion of more money issues, the business of college athletics, which Florida State is obviously knee-deep in. What is the future of Florida State from a conference standpoint? Now, we were watching these meetings, Jerry, going back to February, May at Amelia Island, in August, this Board of Trustees meeting. I thought we were moving full speed ahead toward something significant. Florida State saying that loved the ACC, needed something more. I also think Florida State needed a wingman here. Hello, Clemson. Hello, maybe North Carolina. Hello, anyone else out there. There was a lot of crickets. But Jerry, how did we get from a Board of Trustees meeting expressing frustration, outlining the financial ramifications, to the deadlines there, and the deadline very quietly passed?
I think what gave me some confidence, because let back up and say this. The grant of rights is, I think people dismiss it too summarily. They got a loophole, they're going to get out of it, or they ignore it. And USC and UCLA couldn't defeat it. Texas and Oklahoma couldn't defeat it. And they've got smart lawyers. And so I think the grant of rights is a real threat. Now, the thing that gave me a little bit of confidence was when Peter Collins, the chairman of the Board of Trustees, said that they have a handle on it, and that isn't going to be an issue. Now, I don't know what the handle is, and he's not going to share that with me, certainly. But I think whatever handle they thought they had maybe didn't open the door. And I don't know what it could have been, and I'd be speculating and probably shouldn't do that.
Why? Everybody else is. Every expert on college football expansion is not an expert. I read tweet after tweet after tweet from all these people that think they know. Listen, we got a damn text before we started this thing that FSU's leaving in 2025. And I don't believe it. I mean, I don't know anybody that knows, but listen, I agree. I mean, listen, I thought when they came out and puffed their chest and we're going to do this and we're Florida State, I was like, there's no way they're going to come out and do this grandstanding and then not back it up. And listen, maybe they do have a plan. Maybe they don't. I think that it was a political move. And so far, we've got no proof that it has bared any fruit. It's more sound and fury signifying nothing at this point.
Well, we don't know, and that's the thing. They may have filed, we don't know. And they don't have to announce it. So I guess we should have a public records request to see.
I'm sure somebody's been filing those things up there at the Big Ten and SEC offices.
But at any rate, I kind of, I think when you saw that, the Magnificent Seven article that a writer in North Carolina wrote. Bob, do you know who it was that wrote that?
Well, that was Brett McMurphy, and the problem with the Magnificent Seven is it's not an 8 was not there.
Right.
8 is the magic number, correct?
And close doesn't count in hand grenades or horseshoes, except in the hand grenades and horseshoes. So you either have 8 or you got nothing. And in the 7 named, one of them was North Carolina. And FSU walked into that door and did that press conference. And the only school that spoke out against the trustee meeting was who? Bubba from North Carolina.
Cunningham, right.
Yep. And so if they thought Cunningham was in their court, they had to be shocked the next day when he spoke out against it. And, my sense is that, look, the longer you're in, I've been in it a long time. And, I was in some of the administrative meetings back when, things went south on some things. And the Tobacco Road is, you're not going to, I just don't think they're ever going to, I wouldn't trust them as an ally, not because I don't trust them as people, but you always have to look at what a person's self-interest is. And I think North Carolina, look, think about it this way. If basketball is your primary driver and you're not having to really fund football, the ACC $41 million is a lot of money, particularly if you're Wake and you're budgeting but 80. I mean, Florida State's athletic budget is $160 million because of football. That's what drives it from, and those basketball schools, they're not as desperate to get to 70 million as the football schools are. And then I'll say another thing that, when you look at their self-interest, think about it. It's 12 miles between Duke and North Carolina campus, 12. And they both can drive to Raleigh in 45 minutes, probably. Wake's, you could get up in the morning, go play a game across over to Wake and sleeping in your bed that same night. There are no road games for them. Why in the world, other than when they have to travel out to the hinterland to, Syracuse and Tallahassee, but there's about, count Virginia and Virginia Tech, there are in short driving distance for their student athletes. Why in the world would they want to join a conference that would have them flying thousands of miles a year that they're not now? It just, I mean, their self-interest, they got it really good on Tobacco Road. So I don't know, and I know North Carolina is, they have exceptional, they care about comprehensive excellence. But the football part doesn't matter as much to them as it does to us. And Clemson. And outside of us and Clemson, I'm not sure who else you add in there. But I was going to say one last thing about it is North Carolina politics are legendary. And you've got Wake, North Carolina, and North Carolina State, and Duke, all in the state of North Carolina. It would not surprise me if somebody whispered in Bubba's ear, that this isn't something you need to be doing. And
Right.
Because there appears to have been a change of heart. And so that to me is the big question. Was the handle getting 8 teams to leave? And can you still put that handle together? Now, when you get out away from those primary schools, I mean, why would North Carolina State want to leave the ACC to wind up in the Big 12? You'd have an incredible amount of travel. And I would argue the money's not going to be any better. So I just don't see the motivation. What Syracuse might be inclined, Boston College, maybe.
Well, if Clemson and Florida State were to leave the ACC, what does the ACC left to hang its hat on from a football standpoint? I think that's the reason the NC State may be looking for another home. And listen, there's only
but the point is, Pat, if you can't break the grant of rights other than by getting 8 together, Florida State and Clemson aren't going anywhere.
No, you got to find those 8 teams have to find 8 homes. There's got to be 8 homes for those teams.
There has to be.
You got to hope that the Big Ten would go above 20 if that's what the. And I agree with you. Listen, there's a lot of smart people at Florida State, North Carolina, Duke,
Yes.
Wake Forest, NC State that have looked at this GRO and have not been able to figure out a way out of it, or that we would have seen an announcement yesterday, based on what we heard 2 weeks ago. So yeah, listen, I think the hard listen. And here's where this is all going, which all this compete, the Big Ten's competing against the SEC, Fox against ESPN, ABC, NBC, all this. But it's just like Chip Kelly said the other day. This is all going to a super conference, super league where it's 64, whatever. He suggested 64. I've heard as little as 28. I've heard as much as 84. But that's where it's going. And all we're doing is delaying the inevitable. We're going to, at some point, it'll be 60, let's just say 64 teams. And at some point, there's going to be revenue sharing with the players. And all we're doing is prolonging the agony trying to get there. And the quicker the Big Ten commissioner and the SEC commissioner went to Fox and ESPN and NBC and said, how much inventory do we need to supply you with all you need to fulfill these contracts? And I know it's not that simple. But I'm just saying where it's going. We're going to a super league or 2 super conferences and revenue sharing, and all we're doing is procrastinating, trying to get there because Big Ten wants to make $1 more million than the SEC. At some point, they need to join forces and do what's best for the sport of football.
I think we wanted to hit on how we got to this point from that Board of Trustees meeting to a deadline that is now passed. Now, I think the other question that a lot of people are asking is a variation of this one. McCullough, Alford, Board of Trustees, there is alignment. Jerry, you've written about alignment a lot. We have that with the president, the AD, and the board. That's a good thing for Florida State. So what happens next? And I'll hit on some things I think we can agree on. If you guys disagree, let me know. But we think short term, Florida State can remain very competitive in football financially, in Olympic sports financially, can retain coaches, can be good in the NIL ball game as good as it needs to be. Long term, a lot of questions there, right? The grant of rights obviously extends to 2036. This is very much a football basketball discussion from a revenue standpoint, but we have heard Dr. McCullough was very outspoken about preserving the Olympic sports that Florida State is so successful in. So I think the question now is, having taken into account these issues, short-term, long-term, what do you think could happen next, Jerry? Or what are the next questions that you have as we sort of look at how this might play out, whether it's weeks or months towards something? And maybe that next something also, I should say, is there could be a success initiative announcement coming from the ACC to be determined. They announced it in May with no specifics. What are those specifics? It's very possible we'll hear about them soon. But laying all that out there, Jerry, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think let's start with the success initiative. You know, a couple of things have happened here. You know, FSU has the board of trustee meeting, and it's the fury that Pat talked about, but which was to make a point. It was orchestrated, and I'm not sure that it hasn't yet. I think it's too early to say whether that thing didn't accomplish something. It may have, but at the very same time that happened, the Big 12 exploded, right? And if you think back, it was because the Big 12 denied USC and UCLA an uneven revenue share. They had it as the Pac-10, but then when they went to the Pac-12, they took it away. And USC went on record right then saying, you've got to figure this out or we're out of here, right? Well, they were true to their word. They left. And now you have this week, Stanford and Cal come to the ACC, hat in hand, and say, we need for you to admit us into your conference. So our ACC members heard that. They voted on it. You know, it's who knows whether it'll happen or not right now. They're one vote lacking. But I think all the ACC members saw on August 2nd, Florida State say they did what Southern Cal did years ago. They went on a record as saying, we're leaving. We don't know what year it is, but we're going to leave. And now they're seeing the result of the Pac-12 not listening to Southern Cal. And they got Stanford in that room. And Notre Dame brought them into that room. You know what I'm saying? And so it's very possible that had an effect on the ACC teams coming back together, not because they liked what Florida State said or how Florida State said it, but because there's a reality here that if we don't come to the table and take care of these teams that are investing a lot in football, we're going to lose them, you know. And even if we don't lose them, it must be hell living with us right now. You know,
I can only imagine the phone calls and the emails and the text, right? I
mean, you know, I might, if I was some of those schools, I might pay to let Florida State go. You know what I mean? I mean, Florida State, in our board of trustee meeting, what we said in that meeting, nobody in the conference wants to hear that said. When they go out on the recruiting trail and the coaches recruiting against ACC teams are saying, heck, your own conference member said it's impossible for you to compete in this league. Those aren't things you say and then go recruit. So, you know, I to a certain extent, I know I'm a Florida State guy, y'all, but I'm also objective. And to an extent, Bubba was right, some of what he said, you know? And so, you know, look, we've made our case. They've seen what happened at the Pac-12. They can come back. They've already approved a revenue share. And let's see what they come back with. I don't know how much it's going to be. But
don't you worry that the unequal revenue distribution will water down the league to where it's a 2 football team conference? You got Clemson and Florida State, and you're just beating the hell out of everybody else. There's no competition.
What it is, it's what it's always been.
Well, at least if you got equal revenue, the other guys have a fighting chance. I mean, if you're gonna do that, just go join the SEC. Figure out a way to get in the SEC and the Big Ten and go compete with go fight with the big boys if you want to be the bully. Don't. I mean, come on. I mean, that's my problem with unequal revenue.
Well, that's the problem, Pat. Is how do we get out of this league to get in that league, which is what we all want to do. but that ain't going to happen
There's a certain Saudi fund that'll
anytime
probably help them
soon.
out.
I shouldn't say that.
They can become the first live college football team.
I think that, and that could happen. I mean, with if you went private equity, and until you get out of the ACC, and I'm not saying it can't be done. I'm not saying that FSU doesn't have a plan. I hope they do. I think they do. I'm very confident in our leadership. Truly am. But if we're in the ACC for an extended period of time, we can't quit. We can't roll over and let the ACC and the Big 12 get away from us. If that means we have to debt finance for a period of years to remain competitive, we must do that. And that's, you asked me, Bob, what's next? To me, if you look at our football budget right now is very competitive. Once those schools start getting $30 million more in 2024, and those football budgets start to rise, Michael Alford's going to try to do exactly what he's done since he got here, and that's feed football. Right. He's increased the football budgets, the staffs, building a football operations building, investing in a stadium renovation, or building a new stadium. Alford ain't afraid to spend money. But what he's going to have to be able to do is find a way to get even more money to football. Of that $30 million, it won't all go into football. It'll go into, Title IX will dictate that, nearly half of it go into women's athletics. So, you're looking at the ACC, SEC schools are going to increase their football budgets $5, $6, $7 million, maybe 8, 10. And look at where Florida State has competed over the years. The University of Texas and Texas A&M have had bigger football budgets than Florida State since, I was born. And we've done more with less. It's all about money. And I think Mike said it best the other day when somebody asked him about the success of the transfers he's brought in. It's all about evaluations. And we are in a location that Mississippi would give us $10 million to trade with us.
Exactly.
A year. They just give us $10 million. Let us have your recruiting area. You take ours. I wouldn't trade with them. You got Florida, you got South Georgia. If you have a staff of recruiters that can evaluate, the SEC can't get all of them. And when the SEC gets one, guess what? 2 years, he's going to want to be transferring out of there, either because he's not playing or it's a meat grinder. Yeah. There will also be kids, 5 stars. Somebody's going to say I'm an idiot. And they're right, just categorically, but they'll be, if you differentiate your product right, and we've always done this at Florida State. Oh, you want to go play in the SEC? Go play at Florida. You want to go play, Notre Dame, and that was our old pitch. Notre Dame, USC. We play a national schedule, and we got kids choose that 5 stars. A guy like Derek Brooks bought that. And so you just have to differentiate your product, know who you are, and sell. And you can win with a shorter stick.
You were making that point earlier today. We were talking with some friends outside the practice field, and you said, programs are successful because they pack their football stadiums on Saturdays. They sell tickets, they sell parking passes, concessions, booster donations, etc.
And that's to me, Bob, is the biggest weakness we have with the ACC. Our fans don't buy it. They're not interested in coming to see Florida State if Florida State is playing Duke.
And the challenge of geography, as we've talked about, your 66% of your fan base is traveling 150 miles, 3 hours away or such. It's not as easy to get here. The opponent is not as favorable compared to maybe an opponent in another conference. Jerry, I think you mentioned something in your column that might kind of wrap this up, because we've talked a lot of football, we've talked a lot of finance, but you also mentioned, I think in your column or maybe on the message board, the question of Florida State getting to a 12-team playoff.
That's it. Go ahead.
And the route through the ACC, you might say, well, how desirable is that route? But you only really have Clemson in the way, and you no longer have divisions. So your path to an ACC championship game looks pretty dadgum good. How does your path look like for Florida State getting to a 12-team playoff in a Big Ten, in an SEC? You wrote a little bit about this. I think let's maybe wrap up with some of those.
Yeah, we will. But I was going to say, that was the one last thing I wanted to talk about. What has changed from a few years ago being in the ACC and today is a 12-team playoff. So I'm going to go to Pat's point in a minute here, but if you get to the playoff, you can't do a TCU, right?
Agreed.
I mean, you can't get in there and get blowed out.
Right.
And, Clemson has played in a very weak ACC with Florida State and Miami down. And when they got into the playoff, they won. They won a national championship. They've been there 3 times, and they have made a good accounting for themselves. And that's what will have to happen. And I know the ACC could be very weak the next few years. And Florida State and Clemson, somehow or another, they can't spend down to the ACC level in football. They have to spend up to the SEC level so that when you do get to the playoff, you can be a he-dog. Now, the good part is it ain't a meat grinder, and you're not going to get beat up nearly like the SEC teams beat themselves up, it's getting to where the Big 12 will be beating up on each other too. But not the Big 12, but the Big 10. But, you don't get battle tested in the ACC near like you do in the SEC. But the counterpoint to that is you don't get your bodies beat up as bad either. And so if Florida State is deep and is good as they used to be in the 90s, it didn't matter that the ACC was weak. We beat whoever they put in front of us, So I'm an optimist. I'm not a defeatist. And, we're in this ACC, and we're in it for 24 and maybe 20. Maybe we're out in 25. Let's hope. I trust our leadership. I really do. And if we're in it, then let's win it. And I think Alford's smart enough that we must invest, because if we're constantly winning the ACC, or it's us and Clemson in a battle royale year after year, when an opportunity comes to join a conference, we'll be the top 2 teams they want. And so you just got to fight and invest. And let me go back to Bob. You made the point. I got a little negative there on that, but I made the point earlier today that Clemson sells out its stadium. The person had said, how can Clemson do all this stuff? Well, they sell out their stadium. If Florida State were to sell out its stadium, it's an additional $7 million just in ticket revenue, and an additional $7 million in the booster donation requirement to get that seat. Look, that isn't ESPN's fault. That's not the ACC's fault. Whose fault is that? That's us. We've got to find a way to invest in our own product. And $14 million goes a long way. I like our chances if we had that 14 million against their 30 million, because I believe in the state of Florida and Georgia recruiting, the athletes that are being produced, and and the power of this brand. So I don't think our fans should get fatalistic. Trust the leadership, support your program, do what you can do, and as I said on a show, Tom Block show, never quit. We are the unconquered, and I think we've got to think like that and spend like that and invest like that, even if it requires Alfred going out and borrowing money to provide the resources we're going to need in the short term. You can't do that forever. You can't borrow your way out of a problem. But in the short term, you can invest in your product. And that's where I think we're at.
Those are some good comments. I think that's a healthy dose of realism, a little bit of good optimism to wrap us up. Again, if you're kind of jumping in late, we started with a lot of football discussion the first 40 minutes. We went big picture through FSU's camp, various positions, who we liked, players that we've liked, been impressed by. Again, we thank you for watching Osceola here on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter. Wednesday night, we started at 7 o'clock. You can go back and watch us on YouTube. We'll also be on Apple, Spotify, podcast. We'll upload that audio for you. Again, for Kurt Weiler, Jerry Cutts, Patrick Burnham, I'm Bob Ferranti. We appreciate you subscribing to the Osceola. If you are not, you may want to look on our site very, very soon, as we will have some good promos. No details that I think we want to give out at this moment, but keep checking us out at theosceola.com or floridastate.rivals.com. Check out our social media channels. If you enjoy these podcasts, these videos that we're doing, please subscribe. Please tell a friend, share it, share what we're talking about, and we will see you again soon here again on the Osceola's Seminole Sidelines.